So I've given myself an editing nightmare. So while I figure out how to do that and put that together and the footage together, I'll give you a basic rundown of what happened today. Now, remember, I don't have an experience with this. I'm not a reporter. It's my first time doing this. So I definitely flubbed some stuff. I wasn't recording when I wish I had, and I was doing, clandestine recording. So, it's not great. But there were some very, very liberal groups there. They were coordinating the press conferences. And I'm talking the blue-haired Antifa, pro-Palestine types, and they're very aggressive. And they had decided a narrative, and that was it. When I first, actually walked up to the buildings instead of just, observing from the outside, there was little groups inside gaggling to each other about how this is all Trump's fault. It's somehow Trump's fault. And they were completely missing the point of everything, really. Whether it's absolutely true that there's Venezuelan gangs that have taken over or not, it should be about the people that live there that are obviously dealing with something and are endangered and having complications. But it was somehow completely politicized. They weren't even talking about the issues. Like, when I tried to ask about why men were comfortably walking around the building with guns out and knocking on doors, they just kept avoiding that subject and very loudly yelling, "There's just no gangs here, the slumlord, da da." And I get that. That was definitely an issue before. And they were claiming they were talking to people from the building for the press conference. Well, I was standing there and I was watching down the alley, and people were coming from all over the neighborhood, not the buildings. And I don't even know, people were driving up. They may have been parking far away and then walked over. But I don't know. Were there definitely people there that were most likely in a gang? Absolutely. I and a gentleman I ran into there that was like-minded separated ourselves from the group, and we were definitely looking around differently. And it was clear that we were not with the narrative group. And they let it be known that they were watching us, watching them. It was really, really obvious. Certain vehicles stayed in one place the whole time and revved their engines if we got too close, and whistles and stuff like that. A couple of vehicles just circled and circled and circled, and there was a couple of people that just kept walking back and forth but would not make eye contact. Other people that lived there absolutely were making eye contact, good or bad, talking, just normal human behavior. Was, if you've been around it, you know what I'm talking about. They were watching us, and we were getting marked. I heard some Morse code, but only once, and it wasn't long enough for me to figure out what it was. I was waiting for a repeat. I was also looking to see if there was any signal from people living there that maybe there was distress. Again, every single window was boarded up, whether with blankets, spare furniture, cardboard, wood, completely covered up. And when I asked people, I said, "Is this normal? Do we have a control group? Are they doing this because it's press around? Was it like this before?" Just more liberal, tedious nonsense and avoiding the actual subject. The people who had talked about the violence, actually seeing the gangs there, were terrified. The two that I spoke to at length didn't even want to look in the direction of their homes, let alone point to it. They stood back and they were afraid. The people that they say they have talked to, there's absolutely nothing wrong. I don't know what that's trying to prove. So why are armed men strolling through? And if you've ever been to or lived in an apartment complex like this, you'll know how weird this behavior is. These suspicious people were walking just from one building to another through it, like they owned every single one of them, very confidently, very controlling. The pile of trash in the back is very, very odd. It looks like people's rooms have been cleared out to make room for other things. Other clear signs of gang behavior. There were poles with cameras on, and they were actually saying this area is monitored 24 hours. There were cops circling the area. So if there was activity inside of those buildings, it was being kept very, very quiet. The press was doing a wonderful job of doing the job for them and keeping a narrative. And the suspicious type people are very carefully watching as people gathered for the press conference, and then those particular people were on all four corners watching during, but never spoke. And again, not only have I lived in that neighborhood and worked in neighborhoods like that, there's certain behaviors that you just know. And myself and the extremely awesome, very brave gentleman that started walking around with me, we kind of watched each other's backs. He had a background in these areas as well, former Marine, and had worked at, continues to work in corrections, and we were seeing very particular patterns. The liberal narrative is very, very strong, and again, I'm trying to blame Trump for this somehow, and that if you even think that there's a gang there, you're a racist, and it's a hate against Venezuelans. Well, no, it's a hate against gangs. A Venezuelan gang, not Venezuelans. If it was Russian mob, it would be the Russians. If it was Italian mob, it would be Italians. And they're saying, oh no, it's just a Trump thing. And you're racist if you even think there's a gang. Well, but there is. Anyway, I've got a lot more stuff, but I've given myself an editing nightmare. I've already talked way longer than I planned on. And I apologize. And it's a mess. I don't know what I'm doing. And I'll try to go back. Yeah, so if you have questions, ask me. But I'll do my best to explain it more thoroughly. There's something is happening there at that apartment complex. I don't know exactly what. And I don't have enough evidence to say, but there's something odd happening there. And I don't know. So hopefully I'll find out. I'm going to go back.